The darkest secrets of Ottoman marriage were never written in the wedding songs. They lived in the moment a young bride shut her eyes and prayed that dawn would never come. Why did virgins weep on their wedding night? The answer begins long before a bed was entered. It begins in the palace where silence had rank and obedience wore silk. Picture Topkapi before sunrise. Braziers hiss. Eunuchs move like shadows. Behind screens, a girl who has memorized poems and planets is told that the stars she loves are childish toys. Marriage, they say, is the duty that will make her useful. You clicked for the darkest truth of Ottoman marriage, and here it is. The wedding night was not a private celebration. It was a political instrument honed across generations, a ritualized collapse engineered to produce compliance so absolute that it could survive any storm of power. They called it education. They called it refinement. They fed it the language of virtue until virtue lost its meaning. The imperial harem was not a rumor of perfumed idleness. It was a school where young women learned music, embroidery, and the choreography of power. Yet, for the daughters of the dynasty, instruction carried a different edge. A princess could not choose. She was a treaty in human form. Every gift she possessed would be stripped down and repurposed into one task: bend, smile, endure. The empire arranged marriages as if moving artillery into place. Governors received brides and became loyal. Generals received brides and marched straighter. Provinces quieted when a carriage bearing imperial colors crossed their gates. But the carriage always carried one person whose future had been erased and rewritten without her consent. That erasure began with what matrons called the gentle season. Doors closed, windows darkened. A girl who once roamed gardens was led to a chamber where even the carpet demanded silence. Here she practiced postures that looked graceful from a distance and felt like shackles up close. Knees unbent too slowly earned a correction. Eyes that wandered were trained to lower. She learned to place a cup so that the man it served never felt the tremor in her wrist. Morning lessons taught the bow of reception. Afternoon lessons taught the bow of apology. By nightfall, she was kneeling in a way that told a story before she spoke. The tale was always the same. I submit. I will not flee. I know my purpose. They came next for her voice. Lists of permitted phrases replaced the books she loved. Thank you for your mercy, as you wish. Forgive my inadequacy. Language shrank until emotion had no room to breathe. A question asked out of curiosity was marked as defiance. Curiosity, the power that once lifted her eyes to the sky, was rebranded as danger. The matrons did not strike. They did not need to. Fasting did their work. Isolation cells did their work. Public correction ceremonies did their work. The girl watched herself confess to faults she had not committed. And each confession wore a groove into the mind that would guide her steps on the night to come. The calendar moved without pity. Preparations thickened like syrup. The pavilion for brides was beautiful in the way a locked jewelry box is beautiful. Physicians measured pulses and prescribed baths with fragrant names that hid their purpose. Calm her, soften her, separate her. There were mirrors everywhere, positioned so that obedience became a reflection that followed her from wall to wall. The Sufi word for contemplation was borrowed and drained of spirit. Look inward, they said, and find nothing that resists. She learned that stillness pleased her keepers. She learned that tears could be wiped, but trembling could not be forgiven. Trembling suggested a will. Beneath the palace, instruction grew colder. Mannequins waited on carved beds, a grotesque theater where touch was not romance, but a drill. Older women with voices like slate guided her hands, corrected her flinch, named the movements that a husband would expect. They kept ledgers. They wrote down which gesture made her throat close. They added hours when fear appeared in her face. If she fainted, incense revived her. If she cried, salves cooled the skin until it could be rehearsed again. Up above, musicians tuned for celebration. Down below, a young mind practiced the art of going somewhere else while the body remained. When the wedding day came, the city roared with joy. Drums answered drums, processions wound past fountains fed by ancient aqueducts. Gifts shone like sun on water. In the palace, the bride moved as if walking across thin ice. Every step was supervised. Her gown sparkled with pearls that dragged at her shoulders until the spine learned a permanent bow. Shoes with weighted soles tamed the stride. Clasps hid where fingers could not find them. The costume performed innocence while engineering immobility, and no one who stood at a proper distance could tell the difference. He climbed another staircase, elsewhere in the palace, to a room where men taught dominance as if teaching a military formation. Say this first. Do not allow questions. The body yields when the room obeys. Victory had a script. The door to the bridal chamber would close on two people who had never been alone and open on two roles that had been prepared in slow, deliberate pieces. He would enact conquest. She would enact surrender. Witnesses positioned behind fretwork screens would listen for proof that the machine was running without friction. At last, the chamber received them. Tapestries praised victory. Oil lamps painted the ceiling with a warm light that left no corner dark enough to hide. Cushions carried scents that slowed thoughts to a heavy drift. The bed was both stage and apparatus. Every detail spoke one sentence. You are contained. The night did not begin with a kiss. It began with instruction disguised as tenderness, then instruction without disguise. When fear thickened in her throat, the old lessons returned like rescuers that spoke in a single voice. Go away. Watch from far above. Let the body answer. The mind must stand aside. Collapse was not unexpected. It was almost a sacrament. When her voice failed and her breath stuttered, hands already waiting applied drafts that loosened the grip of consciousness. No one called it cruelty. They called it guardianship. The moment that decided everything arrived quietly. The body yielded, the witnesses nodded, and a page began to turn in a book that had been opened the first day she practiced her first bow. In the morning, celebration bloomed again, as if no mystery had ever lived in that room. The city cheered a union. Inside the pavilion, a girl who once charted constellations stared at a wall and did not blink. In the days that followed, silence settled over the palace like a fog. Servants whispered that the princess was ill, that the new bride slept too long, that her meals returned untouched. Physicians came and went, carrying scrolls filled with meaningless assurances. Her mother, the formidable matriarch who had arranged the match, ordered that no one disturb her daughter's chambers. Yet through the marble floors, the sound of weeping still carried, soft, muffled, endless. They called it the bridal melancholy, as if grief were a phase of womanhood, as if despair could be cured with pomegranate juice and prayer. What none dared to say aloud was that the ceremony meant to sanctify her union had stolen the person she had been. Fatma's attendants recorded that she woke each dawn, gasping, hands clutching her throat, eyes wild with confusion. At the first glimpse of a man's silhouette, even a eunuch's, she shrank behind the curtains, trembling so violently that the furniture quivered with her. Meals had to be fed to her like medicine. When music played in the courtyard, she covered her ears and wept without sound. The matrons called this weakness. The physicians prescribed confinement. The empire called it normal. In official reports, she was described as delicate of temperament, a phrase that erased the horror beneath it. The ritual had worked. She was obedient, silent, pliant. In the language of empire, she was perfect. Her husband, Kara Mustafa Pasha, left soon after their wedding. Campaigns against Persia offered an escape that courtiers pretended was duty. On the battlefield, his commands were sharp, his victories celebrated. Yet soldiers whispered that the Pasha walked like a haunted man, that he drank before dawn and cursed when the wind sounded like a woman crying. He wrote to the palace only when required, brief letters sealed with formal affection. The empire praised his loyalty. The princess sat alone in her rooms, tracing invisible stars on parchment she never finished. Her mind drifted between dreams and waking. Some days she asked for ink. Other days she spoke to walls as if they were her tutors returned from the dead. Years passed, but the wound never closed. The empire moved forward as empires do, feeding itself on ceremony and forgetting. Fatma bore children. Each birth came with a silence so deep that midwives later claimed they feared the air itself would shatter. The infants were taken from her care almost immediately, raised by nurses who recorded their growth as though their mother had ceased to exist. In portraits painted for diplomatic gifts, Fatma appeared serene, her gaze lowered, her garments radiant. Those who knew her whispered that she spoke only in 3 sentences now. Yes, my lord. As you wish. Forgive me. Behind the painted screens, her attendants kept watch. They saw the rituals she repeated when alone, arranging mirrors to face one another, staring into the infinite corridor of reflections until her eyes glazed. She still bathed twice daily, as she had been trained, in waters perfumed with orange blossom and poppy. The fragrances that once dulled her will had become her only comfort. Sometimes she hummed the melodies her tutors had banned, songs of wandering stars and open skies. They said her voice, when it appeared, was fragile and pure, like wind moving through an empty cage. Historians would later describe her condition in clinical terms: dissociation, trauma, psychological fracture. But within the palace, they gave it a name that sounded almost poetic: the fading. It was said that a bride who faded became translucent to fate, untouchable by scandal or grief. To the court, she was a saint of obedience. To those who still remembered the girl who once studied the heavens, she was a ghost trapped in daylight. When her husband finally returned from war, he found a woman who neither welcomed nor resisted him. She existed as ritual demanded, a presence that could be dressed, displayed, and put away. The empire saw stability. What it truly saw was the perfection of its cruelty, the completion of a process refined over centuries. Each obedient bride became proof that the machinery still functioned. Each silent night ensured another alliance, another conquest, another year of power. Yet, in the smallest hours, when the palace slept and the lamps burned low, a single voice sometimes rose from the forbidden wing. Servants claimed it sounded like a lullaby sung to no one, a melody so fragile that it trembled against the marble and vanished before dawn. Whether it was mourning or defiance, no one could say. But it was enough to make even the eunuchs cross themselves and whisper prayers before entering that corridor. Fatma's life stretched on in this half-light for decades. Her children grew into strangers, her husband aged into stone. When she died, the empire recorded the date with precision: March 15th, the anniversary of her wedding night. Officially, the cause was fever. Unofficially, the attendant said she simply stopped breathing while gazing at a patch of sky visible through the lattice. a single square of stars that had never left her mind. 3 centuries later, the truth emerged from dust and secrecy. In 2019, historians gained access to restricted archives beneath Topkapi Palace. Among brittle documents and sealed scrolls lay coded medical notes, letters between matrons, and architectural sketches of the bridal pavilions. What they uncovered rewrote everything. 37 princesses, dozens of journals detailing identical rituals, training, sedation, silence. Each described the same outcome: compliance born of terror. The researchers called it ritualized trauma as governance. It was not an accident of culture, it was policy. The revelation sparked outrage and denial in equal measure. Some claimed forgery, others called it slander. But the chemical analyses of surviving ointments and infusions confirmed the truth. Those compounds could still induce paralysis of will today. Trauma had been engineered with the precision of science long before psychology had a name. Fatma's tears were not weakness. They were data in an empire's experiment on obedience. If this truth unsettles you, remember what silence can hide. History is not past. It is the echo that lives in every institution built on submission. The brides of Topkapi remind us that beauty can be camouflage, that ceremony can conceal cruelty, that obedience demanded in the name of order always carries a cost paid in human spirit. If you've stayed with this story to its end, don't let it end here. Subscribe to this channel, because every empire has its buried ghosts, and together, we can dig them out one by one. Comment whose story you want unearthed next. Because the deeper we go, the more we understand that the world we inherit was built not just by those who ruled, but by those who were forced to bow. And their whispers still wait for someone to listen. The revelations that emerged from those archives did more than illuminate the cruelty of a single empire. They exposed the architecture of silence itself. In document after document, the language was almost clinical. Phrases like measured compliance, ritual submission, reduction of agitation. Yet between those sterile lines, one could still hear the faint pulse of human suffering. The matrons had signed their names with ceremonial flourishes, the physicians with stamps of imperial authority, as though bureaucracy could sanitize horror. What they called discipline was torture refined into art. And what they called marriage was the empire's most delicate weapon. The research team led by Dr. Elif Korkmaz spent years decoding the system. Each princess's file followed the same stages: initiation, conditioning, sedation, consummation, observation. Every gesture, every breath was recorded as data. In one margin note, a physician described a girl's collapse as a successful passage into obedience. Another file included a drawing of the restraint cords sewn invisibly into wedding garments. Each revelation deepened the wound of discovery. Modern psychologists reviewing the records identified patterns identical to those found in survivors of captivity and coercive cults. Fatma's fading had not been unique. It had been designed. Public reaction was volcanic. For months, Turkish newspapers ran conflicting editorials. Some nationalists accused the researchers of desecrating heritage, claiming the documents were European propaganda. Others demanded that the Ottoman dynasty's descendants issue a formal acknowledgement. But the archives were undeniable. The ink was Ottoman. The handwriting was consistent. Even the dust dated correctly. Silence, once the empire's shield, had finally failed. Beyond the politics, something quieter began to happen. Visitors to Topkapi started lingering longer in the harem's courtyards, staring at the latticed windows behind which so many lives had been unmade. The tour guides, who once recited lines about luxury and intrigue, found themselves speaking in softer tones, mentioning the rituals that had never been meant for daylight. Historians organized exhibitions titled The Hidden Daughters, displaying fragments of tapestries, mirrors, and ceramic vessels recovered from the bridal pavilions. One mirror, cracked diagonally, became the symbol of the project, a reflection split between beauty and agony. Dr. Korkmaz herself wrote, "These women were not victims of love, but of governance. Their obedience maintained the geometry of empire." The phrase spread across academic journals and then onto protest banners carried by women in Istanbul's streets. It was no longer just history. It was a mirror held up to every system that demanded silence in exchange for survival. In analyzing the compounds found in preserved ointments, pharmacologists discovered traces of opium, valerian, and mandrake, anesthetic agents that dulled perception while keeping the subject conscious. Combined, they induced what modern medicine calls a dissociative trance. The empire had mastered biochemical submission centuries before anesthesia had a name. It was trauma turned into tradition, science disguised as sanctity. The deeper researchers looked, the wider the pattern stretched. Letters exchanged with ambassadors suggested that foreign courts had admired the discipline of Ottoman marriage. French and Venetian envoys requested summaries of the protocol for educating noble brides. The darkness had traveled beyond Istanbul's walls, dressed in the language of refinement. What began as an Ottoman secret became a global inheritance of female obedience. But history, once awakened, refuses to sleep. Each recovered file, each decoded symbol, became an act of resurrection. Fatma's name, once buried under the label of pious wife, now appeared in textbooks beside the term psychological conditioning. Scholars began to treat her journals, what little survived, as early testaments of resistance. One fragment found in a hidden compartment of her chamber read, "Stars remain free because no empire can reach them." It was just 8 words, written in delicate calligraphy, but it was enough to collapse centuries of silence into a single voice that refused to disappear. Fatma's tragedy became a lens through which modern societies examined their own rituals. Engagement ceremonies, purity tests, social expectations, all were reevaluated in the shadow of the empire that had perfected control. Documentaries aired across Europe and the Middle East, weaving archival footage with reenactments that dared to show what history had buried. Every viewing sparked the same uneasy question: how much of that machinery still survives, hidden beneath our customs, our laws, our expectations of obedience disguised as love? By the time Dr. Korkmaz's final report was published, the world understood that the Ottoman marriage ritual was not an isolated cruelty, but part of a continuum. The same continuum that turns women into symbols, daughters into treaties, and pain into policy. Fatma's voice, faint as it was, had traveled farther than the architects of her silence could ever have imagined. And that brings us to you, listening centuries later. If you followed this story, you've already joined the act of remembering. Because every time these words are spoken, the darkness that hid them loses its power. So here's what you can do. Subscribe to this channel and keep pulling at the threads of history they tried to cut. Comment below which untold story should be brought to light next. Because for every Fatma, there are dozens more whose names never reached a page. Keep watching, keep questioning, and remember, the past isn't gone. It's only waiting for someone brave enough to listen. The palace walls that once silenced those women now echo with footsteps of tourists, historians, and descendants seeking answers. Yet every stone still carries the memory of a scream that was never supposed to be heard. What was once a center of glory is now a monument to control. The empire's obsession with obedience cast in marble. Fatma Sultan's story survived not because her world wanted it to, but because truth, like a buried ember, always finds air. The final revelations of the 2019 archive investigation went beyond mere documentation. They unearthed correspondence between physicians and senior viziers, discussing what they called the principle of soft dominion. In these letters, the empire's scholars theorized that fear, applied gradually and disguised as education, created the most enduring loyalty. They wrote of refining the female temperament, of tempering youth into calm. What they meant was the systematic annihilation of agency. It was policy written in the language of care. Fatma's journals, recovered in fragments from a hidden compartment behind her dressing table, revealed how fully she had understood her captivity. "They taught me to kneel so well," one line reads, "that even when I dream, I bow to no one." Another fragment describes the moon she could see from her lattice window. "It visits me nightly. It does not need permission to shine." These sentences were likely written during her later years, when her voice had almost disappeared from the public eye. She had learned to speak through symbols, embedding resistance in beauty, the only form of rebellion left to her. The research team's analysis showed that the ritualized conditioning of Ottoman brides was not born of sadism, but of statecraft. Every ritual served a purpose: to maintain dynastic control, to ensure alliances, to silence dissent. Marriage was the empire's most effective chain, one that required no armies, only obedience masquerading as devotion. Fatma's suffering was replicated across generations. Princess Aishi, married to an aging governor of Damascus. Princess Geverhan, sent to Cairo. Princess Mihrimah, whose name means sun and moon, never saw sunlight again after her wedding night. 37 documented cases of psychological collapse, each carefully described, each stamped with official approval. In time, those rituals evolved. When the empire modernized, the old ceremonies were abolished publicly, but continued privately in diluted forms. Language softened, methods adapted. Yet the principle remained: obedience through ritual, silence through fear. In every era that followed, echoes of those chambers reappeared, behind veils, in locked rooms, in expectations whispered from mother to daughter. Fatma's story, then, is not just Ottoman history. It is the anatomy of patriarchy in its most refined form. Modern scholars draw parallels between the Terbiye-e-Mubarak protocol and later European practices of bridal discipline. In Victorian England, newlywed women were prescribed rest cures to eliminate hysteria, prolonged isolation under the guise of medicine. In Imperial Japan, noble brides underwent purity retreats, meant to cleanse them of independent thought. In each case, different cultures, same outcome: conditioning obedience in women of status because power feared ungoverned minds. Fatma's suffering was both unique and universal. Today, in Istanbul, a quiet movement continues her legacy. Artists, historians, and psychologists have founded the Silent Brides Project, turning her story into art installations that blend calligraphy, light, and recorded whispers in multiple languages. Visitors walk through mirrored halls where reflections fragment and fade, mirroring the psychological disintegration described in the archives. The goal is not to shock, but to make remembrance unavoidable. One inscription carved above the exhibit entrance reads, "If we cannot free the past, we can refuse to repeat it." Dr. Elif Korkmaz's final statement to the press still resonates. The story of Fatma Sultan is not only a historical discovery, it is a warning about how power disguises itself as love. She argued that understanding these rituals isn't about condemning one culture. It's about recognizing the mechanics of domination that transcend time and geography. When tradition becomes a tool to erase autonomy, history is no longer past. It's prophecy. Across the world, Fatma's story found unlikely audiences: students, activists, filmmakers, even descendants of the Ottoman lineage. In a rare public comment, one descendant of the dynasty expressed regret. "We inherited palaces, but not their ghosts. Now we must face them." That acknowledgement was small, but it mattered. For centuries, the empire had buried women beneath its triumphs. Now those same women were reclaiming the narrative, one truth at a time. Perhaps the most haunting artifact recovered from the archives was a sketch, an unfinished diagram of the bridal pavilion drawn by an anonymous architect. Beneath the design, in faint Ottoman Turkish, a single phrase appeared: "All structures imprison what they protect." Historians believe it may have been written by a palace engineer who recognized the cruelty of his own work. The line became the epigraph of the final research publication, a reminder that civilization often builds its glory on the suffering it refuses to see. The echoes of that truth reach far beyond Istanbul. In every corner of the world, there are still institutions that repeat the empire's mistakes in subtler ways. Societies that celebrate control as virtue. Families that confuse silence for respect. Systems that train people to shrink until their obedience looks like grace. Fatma's life is no longer just a tragedy. It's a mirror. Think of her final night. A girl who loved the stars, reduced to ritual. A mind that sought knowledge, conditioned into stillness. Yet centuries later, her name is spoken again, her story dissected, her journals studied in classrooms that would once have barred her from entering. That is the quiet victory she never lived to see. The reclamation of her voice. The power of her story lies in its endurance. The empire that built her cage fell in 1922. Its rulers vanished, its armies disbanded. But Fatma's memory survived in the margins of forgotten books, in the whispers of servants, in the curiosity of scholars who refused to look away. What the empire designed to vanish has instead become immortal. And now you've carried it further, listening, reading, feeling the weight of her silence. You've joined the chain of witnesses that history tried to sever. But remembrance alone isn't enough. The same mechanisms that broke Fatma still exist wherever obedience is demanded in the name of honor, wherever voices are trained to apologize before they speak. Don't let her story end as mere tragedy. Share it, discuss it. Question the rituals that still shape our lives, whether in family, religion, politics, or culture. Refuse to mistake control for love or silence for peace. Because every time a truth like this is told aloud, another stone falls from the walls that once held those women captive. If this story moved you, subscribe right now. There are more buried histories waiting in archives, more silenced lives waiting to be unearthed. Comment whose story you want exposed next. Marie Antoinette's forgotten letters, Cleopatra's last confession, the hidden diaries of Russia's lost duchesses. Each tale reveals the same truth, that the price of power has always been paid in human tears. And remember, history is not written by the victors. It's rewritten by those who refuse to forget. The darkest secrets of Ottoman marriage were meant to vanish beneath 6 centuries of silence. But today, Fatma Sultan speaks again, and her whisper has become a roar. Keep listening. keep questioning. Because somewhere in another archive, another voice waits for you to find it. And when you do, the walls of power will tremble once more.